this is the first of what I think we'll do from time to time, is having a framing tool shop, and so kind of want to talk about things that will help you, not just framing but also ways of communicating that just help a little better. So some interesting bits of advice and such. And we're trying to tie this all back to the psychology because that's really what all of this is about. So this one we're going to talk about language tools, just things that will help you write and or speak better. And but I thought I would bring up one of our parts of the process that we call stop, drop, and roll, and that's the stop part. Because I think before beginning any messaging, it's really important to stop and analyze what's going on. And you want to do that so that you don't inadvertently slip into the Republican frame. Also, you want to identify the real issue. Many Republican messages and messages that you'll hear from reporters are, well, the Republican messages are designed to distract from what the real agenda is and from what our agenda is. And the reporters have obviously kind of just gone right along with that in many ways. And then the last part of that is if we look at what they're doing very closely, we can uncover weaknesses. And so I thought we would talk about this last one first. And it's projection. And this is one of the most popular devices that you'll see Republicans use. The president does it every 15 minutes. And basically what it is that what Republicans are saying about our positions quite often is what are the weaknesses in their position. So, for example, let me ask you this. What do Republicans say about either Obamacare or Medicare for all? I'll call on Kathy Malecki because I know she's a nurse.
Uh, Mostly they say, how are you going to pay for it?
Yep. How are you going to pay for it? Costs too much? What are a couple other ones?
Government government control.
Government control. Yeah, it's run by bureaucrats. Government.
Government overreach, I think, is what they like.
Yeah.
That's okay.
The other one
Didn't they bring?
you don't have any choice.
Right. Exactly. Takes away your
Death
freedom of choice.
panels.
Death panels.
That's one I was gonna go with. Yep.
Boy, you guys are good because you got all of them. At least all the ones that I thought of before coming in here. So this is what they say about Medicare for all or Obamacare. It costs too much. It takes away freedom of choice. Death panels run by bureaucrats or the government. And one size fits all is another one you hear. And so think about that. Those are basically, maybe with the exception of one size fits all, but all the rest of those are the problems with our current system. Our current system is bankrupting the country. It costs a lot. And for some reason, for very obvious reasons, the Republicans want to make you believe that if it's Medicare for all, then you're going to pay even more money, which actually you're paying for it now in your in your job. A good chunk of your earned benefits are your medical benefits. If you've got a family of four, you're spending $20,000 to $24,000 a year on health care.
Or your company is.
Or your well, but that's your earned money. You wouldn't
Yeah.
work there if you didn't get it. And so that and your retirement benefits, that's all earned. You earn that. That's yours. And so by all accounts, Medicare for all would cost less. And yes, you would have to pay taxes, but then that money that they're paying to the insurance companies now, that your company pays, could go to you instead. The death panels, I don't know about any of you, but I know we've gone for medical care for one of our sons, and we had to fight Blue Cross Blue Shield to cover it. They just decide what it is they're going to cover and what they don't. So those are the death panels, and run by bureaucrats. I don't know. People who are in the insurance companies deciding whether or not they're going to pay for something is a pretty big, giant bureaucracy. I don't care if it's the government. I mean, the corporations are, taking way more from us than the government does. That's for sure. And then the
And the
one
other-
size, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, the other part of that is those insurance companies are run by bureaucrats.
Yeah,
And if you
exactly.
look at the overhead cost of the insurance companies, it's huge.
It's huge. And then one size fits all. Yeah, actually, I think that's a good thing. If the one size is you get all the health care you need, that's a great that's a great plan. And then, but the other plan, the current plan, is kind of, in a way, I'm stretching here, one size fits all, because the size is that you have to buy insurance, and if you can't afford it, you don't get it. So I'm really stretching on that one, but see, what happened here is you look at what the Republicans are projecting, what they're saying is wrong with our stuff. It will generally tell you what's wrong with their position, and those are weaknesses. So you could certainly message around the fact that our current system costs too much, and it takes away the freedom of choice because you have to go to an in-network doctor, and they have death panels and bureaucrats. So, so think about that. The reason it's important to know what the conservatives are saying about your issue is that you want to be sure you're not saying what they're saying, and you want to make sure you're not in their frame. And you want to look for these things that tell you where their weaknesses are. So, okay, so anyway, they know that once they say these things, and they're really good about figuring out what they want to say about us and getting out there first. That's why they get away with this projection. So they'll come out and they laid all this stuff on our things because we didn't define our plan. And so their story sticks. The first person, again, who frames wins. So let's look a little closer into some more of the psychological things that you can be thinking about when we're doing this. When we do our approach, we normally default to facts and logic. We've talked about this before. That just isn't terribly effective with most people. It's not because they're stupid. It's because it's just not the way they're thinking about politics. And when we argue with conservatives, it keeps us in their frame. So those things we want to drop doing. But we also want to understand that policy and morality are different, and in messaging, morality wins. So if you're talking policy and all the intricacies of policy and numbers and statistics, people's eyes are going to glaze over. If you talk about what's right and wrong, then the morality wins. So Lakoff says, he makes these suggestions. He says, understand your values. One of the reasons we do what we're doing is because I asked people, including myself, what a liberal was, and I had a real hard time coming up with what it was. It took me a while. And then speak them out loud. Don't be afraid to say things. Repeat them often. Use them honestly, and I would add with integrity. And if you have to talk about facts and policies, link them very clearly to values. The best defense is an offense. So again, get out there and message first. If you can't, take those messages back. All that stuff about Medicare for all, take that back and apply it to them. And put the positive first. And we won't get into it here, but we talked about a truth sandwich before. And you always want to talk about your policy and the positives of it first before you mention anything about your opponent. So there's also, it turns out in psychology and in thinking and language that it's important to use sensory words. And this is going to sound a little weird. And first, maybe I should ask, are there any questions on what we've done so far?
No, that makes sense.
Okay. So, sensory words. We don't often think of using these, but they're immensely powerful, not only in commanding attention, but in changing people's feelings and perceptions about an issue. And it's simple in concept. I think it's hard to do because it just takes practice. And I know I still struggle with it, but I try. If I have the time to sit down and write something out, then I'm more likely to do this. So I would recommend practicing doing these and writing things out, just so you get how this happens and it becomes more normal for you. So there are five. Well, they say there are five senses. There are more, but there's visual, there's auditory, There's kinesthetic or movement, and that movement that kinesthetic also is bodily feelings. So emotions change your body, and so you'll feel that. And then there's taste and smell. So let me give you some examples of how you can use that in your wording. We'll go with visual to begin with. Can you see how beautiful this lake would be without all the plastic? Here, I'm coming over here now. And then the sound of heavy trucks near the park. Let's say the issue is you're trying to get a business route to change in your town because it goes right near a park. You got a big tire dump someplace. You say the children wake to the smell of burning rubber. You can talk about the heavy burden or the back-breaking work. That's kinesthetic. Sorry. And you also have just feelings and emotions, which again change you physiologically. So if you're, what happens to the mind happens to the body. What happens to the body happens to the mind. So if you can say, now doesn't that just feel right? So I know this is kind of weird. Does this make sense? Can you see how, you practice this a little bit, let this stuff creep into what you're doing, especially writing when you have more time to, you don't have to think on your feet quite so much. But think about that, and that could be a letter to the editor. But see, the thing, all of these things we just talked about are things that put the situation inside the voter because they're bodily things, they're sensations, perceptions. And so when you say, can you see how beautiful this lake would be without all the plastic, their brains are actually thinking about a clean lake. So you're actually lighting up brain cells that make sense. And remember, all your memories, and you have visual memories, you have auditory memories. I remember all sorts of music, tastes and smells. All that stuff is living inside the brain cells. So you want to light those things up. It just helps. So let's see where we're at here. Sorry. Okay, and then also realize that people are often dominant in one sense. I tend to be a visual learner, and so diagrams and charts and things work really well for me. But that doesn't work well for anybody. You're probably not going to know what gets a voter going. So if you're just practicing all of these and slip them in where you can, that's great. This is kind of nice if you're a candidate because you have a little room to stretch out. You've got your website. You can make your videos. I know Jason does. And see if you can work these things in. Not terribly, obviously, just stick them in there. Also, basic level words like that, they trigger the brain and involve movement and action. And there's something about movement. When I was in experimental psychology back in college and grad school, and one of the things that we studied was that there was somebody posited that there's no learning that can take place without muscle movement. And it sounded like the weirdest thing I ever heard. They said, what do you mean? How can that be? And they said that in general, muscle movement of any sort aids learning. And what they did is they actually used curare to keep dogs awake, but completely unable to move any muscles. And then they would pair a stimulus with, a treat of one sort or another, which they couldn't eat right away, but at least they saw it. And it turns out that those dogs didn't learn as well. Now, I don't know if I was all high as a kite. I don't know how well I'd learn either. But there's something to that. And I'll give you one example. What happens when you can't remember how to spell a word? The first thing you reach for is a pen and a piece of paper, and you write it down. Because your hand knows how to write it. So it's, this movement, it's kind of an interesting thought there to think that movement is that important. So, and then also if you're talking about movement and action, what you're talking about is just going to take on more life. People are going to be able to imagine your story better because you're including things that make them think in their heads about action, not just an idea, but actions that they do every day. So this kind of thinking falls under a general category of basic words, which is a category in linguistics. And the idea is that these are very simple words. They're easy to process and remember. They're familiar words. Lakoff says to put it in professor speak, they make up our most basic conceptual repertoire. And they are very low level, meaning that they're very specific and not general. So I know this sounds confusing. Let me give you some examples which should help. And these are just random examples. You would talk about a chair, not furniture. Now, that sounds strange. Furniture is kind of a category. Furniture could be a dining room table, it could be a hutch, it could be a bed, it could be a chair. If it's a chair, if you mention the word chair and you're being very specific about it, a chair is something people sit in. They can imagine themselves sitting in a chair and getting up from a chair. You want to say something like cat, not animal. Animal's too broad, too general. But you say cat, now a picture pops in their brain. I mean, yeah, pictures may pop in your brain when you say animal. You might think of a zoo, or you might think of the African veld. Is that right? And but you say cat, and people know what a cat feels like on their lap. They can imagine petting it, feeding it. So applying this more to an issue, talk about a melting ice cap, not the climate crisis. I mean, climate crisis is a good frame for the problems we have in climate right now. But when you're doing that, use melting ice caps, or you might think of a polar bear or open ocean. And some of you may have met Hobie Stocking, who is with Skywater Earth. And Hobie and I did a whole workshop on environmental framing. And if you get a chance to go to skywaterearth.com, you will see that Hobie is an absolute master of using these basic level words, ones that you can think about and see. And so he talks about, soil and water and air and sky, not environment. I mean, he says environment, but throughout his whole website, you will see, pictures and words of these very specific things because people can relate to them. And again, that's sky, water, earth, one word, .com. And I'm hoping to get Hobie. He's agreed also to come, and I wanted to have him be a guest, and we'll do an environmental one of these on a Monday night coming up soon. So here's a simple way to just test as you're going through. Oh, sorry, I had that. I read all that. So you know what? I'll leave that up for a second in case anybody wants to take a look, or if you're watching this on the recording, just pause.
And remember, there's a handout on this too on our website. So I sent an email earlier. Some of you may have downloaded the handout, but if you didn't, it's on our website.
And are there any questions about this so far?
I like it.
Okay. Here's a way to just test, as even if you're not thinking so much on the basic level words, use this test as you go through something you've written or you've been thinking about, and say, have I seen it? Have I touched it? Can I directly interact with it? Have I smelled it or heard it? Can I draw it? And even could I mime it? Could I play Pictionary with it and make gestures that people can understand it? If some of what you've written meets that, then you're probably using some basic level words. You've been able to get down into that level, and you're being more specific, and you're lighting up imagery and sense memories in your listener's head. And so that's I think it's an interesting thing to think about. It doesn't seem like it's not intuitive, but once you start thinking about it and start using it, all of a sudden you'll watch what you're writing start to pick up a little bit. Kind of fun. Let's move to another. This is more of a technique here, and it's called future pacing. So let me read this to you. We'll do it once, and then we'll come back to it. Our grandparents secured stable jobs, built homes, raised families, and retired in comfort. You don't hear stories like that anymore. If my opponents give Social Security to Wall Street, our future will be even less secure. We can protect Social Security today, so we'll live in a brighter future for us, our children, and our children's children. What's going on here is we're moving around in time. We're painting pictures. Stories generally take place over time. And so getting that time dimension into your messaging in some way is a good way for people to pay attention, because if things are in a sequence, they're going to pay more attention because it's just naturally more interesting and they want to know what happens. And then this, it's a very compelling way to paint a picture of positive outcomes of your policies. For example, we can protect Social Security today, so we'll live in a brighter future for us, our children, and our children's children. And in this story, I've taken the sense, there truly is a sense of time, and we started out with grandparents, so we're in the past. We said what they did, so you can see they secured stable jobs, built homes, raised family. All of that takes place over time, and retired in comfort. So now we've gone all the way to the end of our grandparents' life. In the next ones, we say you don't hear stories like that anymore. So now we're in the present, thinking about the past. If my opponents give Social Security to Wall Street, our future will be even less secure. Now we've moved into the future. And then in this last one, we're in the future again, or we start out today. We protect Social Security today, so we'll live in a brighter future. It's an interesting trick, and I got this one from Tom Hartman. Anybody listen to Tom Hartman?
Yeah.
Tom Hartman's pretty good. In fact, he's got a book. Excuse me, I'm going to grab it.
He has lots of books.
I have lots of books.
No, Tom Hartman has written lots of books, like 25 or something.
That's right. I have a lot of books. I haven't written any. And this is the book. Is that...
There.
Is it backwards?
Backwards.
Okay. It's called Cracking the Code. And it's by Tom Hartman.
You can... It's backwards. Let me hold it and see if it's not backwards.
It's probably not backwards.
It won't be backwards for her. I noticed that earlier when you guys were going back and forth that you guys had...
I'm looking the wrong direction, I guess. So anyway, Tom Hartman's book's a very interesting book. He's got all sorts of really cool ways to change the way that you message, and it's all very psychological also. But like I said, this is just a very, very compelling way to work your message in. I'm not really telling a story per se. It's not a story about a particular individual, but it's kind of like a story, and it's so compelling. I'll give you an example of a guy who uses this and has done very well with it. There's that movie guy for all the movie trailers, and they all start out in a world where, and then you're sucked in. You want to know what kind of world, where what's happening. And so he's painting a picture of this world, and it's something that's not, it's a movie. It's obviously not what's happening here. It's some science fiction movie or whatever. So you want to know what it's about, and you're just listening more carefully. And these are just word tricks. I mean, we're not actually framing here, but these things will get people to listen more to what you're doing.
That's actually just quickly, if you don't mind, George, the concept I came up with. There's something I've actually borrowed from Boris Johnson over in the Prime Minister now. He called it a save get key. So you'd have sort of on your keyboard a save get, right? So you put in a pre-scripted thing, like you're saying, in a world. Yeah. And I kind of had this idea running against Peggy Scott. Well, District 35B was suffering from job unemployment, and then you kind of move it, or while this was happening, you this goes to repetition, where you kind of say the same thing over and over. But that was something that we haven't executed yet, but our team wanted to do, like, while District 35B ... what was Peggy Scott doing? She voted against this. When we needed this the most ... like, and sort of you start with the same thing and maybe different concepts, and then kind of what is my opponent doing during that time? But that sort of repetition kind of, it bleeds into your skull a little bit, and I think there's a lot of value in that.
And because people want to find out what comes next too. So that repetition is very important. Even though we didn't like to drill when we were in grade school, in math and in other things, drill has its it's positive points. It's not the best way to learn something, but if you're doing a skill, like if you're trying to learn how to play guitar or ride a motorcycle safely, you want to practice. In fact, or even better, if you want to learn how to frame really well, you have to practice. Repeating it makes those. Remember, we showed in I think last week where your brain wants to take the easiest path, the easiest and quickest path to an idea. So you're confronted with something, your brain's going to go to take the easiest way to get an answer for what's going on. So it's going to go down the neural pathways that are strongest. The neural pathways that are strongest are the ones that have been repeated more often. And so that's why the more we repeat our message, the pathways to our ideas gets wider, and because of the way the brain works, people will start to use, and the other ones will die away and won't be as strong. So yeah, repetition is very, very important, especially if we're all framing, if we get this framing thing well, and we're talking about those core values, which on the handout that you can download, I have those at the very bottom. If you use those core values all the time, then in effect what we're doing with all our messages is we're repeating those core values in there. Whether you say it verbatim or evoke that feeling, freedom, you could use the word freedom if you want to, but you could also evoke that, or use the word empathy, or you can just tell a story that shows you have empathy. So anyway, that's kind of this future pacing thing I think is pretty cool, because it's a way to have a story without having a story. You're not telling somebody else's story or anything, but you've created something to feel so much like a story that people want to know how it goes, because it's moving through time. So keep that in mind. You can also tell a story of what happens if your opponent's position prevails. That's kind of going on in the middle here. If my opponents give Social Security to Wall Street, our future will be even less secure. You can tell that story also with if my opponent keeps us out of the Paris Accords, then we're never going to solve this problem. Then the world that we're going to be living in will look like nothing we have now, or it'll look worse. Add your century words in, and so you can do that. You have to be careful when you do that. When you're talking about your opponent at any time, you always have to make sure that you're not reinforcing their position by repeating it. But if you say, if my opponent gets their way, you haven't repeated the position.
Can I just put a hook on
yes.
that, if you don't mind, George?
Yeah, please.
I hate to interrupt. And
don't worry about it. That's great.
I want to come back to this at the end, but I posted something that you just hit on Facebook. I advertised it. I got a couple of trolls from the other side. And what you just said hits hard. I actually have it brought up. I don't want to interrupt your flow.
No, go for it.
We can come back to that. I have a perfect example of exactly what you're talking about, if that's okay. If we have time at the end.
Yeah, if you can get it up, and then we'll get the screen share going for you, and we'll bring that up. Thanks. It's possible that if you don't do it the right way, or if you do make the mistake of repeating your opponent's position, or if you sound like you're just getting down on them big time, then what may happen is you may force your listener back into a critic mode rather than a participant or an empathizer mode. So if it looks like you're just slamming the other guy, some people will just go, well, this isn't about that issue anymore. He's just slamming. The only thing they're going to think about is you're slamming your opposition. So you want to be got to be a little careful about that. And some recent research suggests that if your communication comes across as negative, that what'll happen is people will also naturally rally to protect someone being attacked. So they're saying that you got to be careful with what may be perceived as negative communication. But otherwise, I really like this whole idea of future pacing and telling a story and using it to talk about your opponent's position without talking about it. If my opponent gets their way, this is what'll happen. Okay. There's also a couple of other things, shorter things here, and then we can get on to more discussion. Say what you are offering. It's important to see what to say to the voter what it is you're offering the voter. What are they going to get about it or out of it? And like we spend way too much time complaining about Republicans and the president and their policies. I mean, I'll guarantee you, we spend more time talking about that than we talk about our own policies. And you go on Facebook and it's proof positive. I do it myself. I'll post something dumb that Trump said and make a funny joke about it, right? But, that's wasting time. So what you want to do is get your message out there, spend most of your time on it, but make sure you include in there what it is you're offering the voter when you're doing this. When you're done with their message, they should feel they're coming out ahead with our policies, that they're going to come out winning. And I think that's it's a kind of a subtle thing. It's just one little thing to remember. But again, another test for your message. Do you think the voters coming out of your message thinking that they've won something? That if you get your way, that they're going to get something that works for them. It's maybe this you could call it what's in it for them. So that's just another little one. And then another little psychological tidbit is that people weigh losses heavier than gains. This is coming out of behavioral economics. And actually, that particular finding completely upended the rational actor theory of the economy. The idea that people, the whole Chicago school, if you've looked into it, it's what underpins the entire Republican view of the economy. Leave it alone, let it do what it's doing. People will make rational decisions. If they don't always individually, they will make rational decisions as a group in the aggregate. And it turns out there's just really no proof for that. What there is proof for is that people weigh losses heavier than gains. And so with that in mind, that applies to what we're doing, because it may sometimes be better to talk about what your listener will lose if your opponent's position is adopted. Kind of the opposite of what you're offering with your position. Here's what you'll lose with your opponent's position. You can say, in my plan, working parents do not give up the time they ought to spend with newborns. Just an example. Does that kind of make sense? It's just a couple little tidbits that I think are important, and they're all tied into this way that people think. Not directly related to framing, but this is the way the brain works. And knowing how the brain works, that's what gets us going. I want to leave time for questions. I'll point out that in the handout, I have a part in there that's entitled Compelling Writing. And I don't know if you have the handout. If you don't, take a look at it. But this is something that a part of a piece that Jeremy Powers and I worked up. Jeremy was a reporter with the Star Tribune, just a brilliant guy. One of the he's in Texas half the year, so we don't get to have him here all the time. But great guy. He was a reporter at the Strib and was on the editorial board. So I have something on the website on letters to the editor that this is taken from. And that's, I think, the best letters to the editor thing I've seen. Jeremy, in that piece, says exactly what the editors are looking for and what they don't want to see. So that's good. But otherwise, this compelling writing thing was applied for letters to the editor, but it works with other things. It's simple things like using active verbs, or let verbs be verbs, as somebody said. So rather than to run, you want to say run or running. If you're writing a letter to the editor or any kind of a long thing, experiment with your sentence or word or paragraph order. Sometimes just moving a paragraph around, you'll see your whole piece crystallize. And other things like making sure that you proofread and give it to someone else. And then when you think you're done with it, writing needs to ferment overnight. So let it just sit and ferment overnight. Come back to it the next morning. I'll guarantee you'll find maybe something you would rather have said or not said. And you'll also very instinctively feel grammatical rough spots. That's my best editing is when I go through something the next day. I put time in between it because then I go, oh, I don't know what I was thinking there. That's not grammatically a good way to say that. And you can tighten things up because there's a feel there. So take a look at that. And then at the very end of the handout is the list of liberal values. And I put those on there because I know we've talked about it before, but I don't think I provided anything with that list. I've done this instead. I'll hold up my little card with the values on it. So, and they are the right way on the handout. So, so that's that. I thought I would open it up for questions now.
Really helpful. I like that.
Thanks, Melody. How many of you do writing as well as just speaking, voter contact, phone banking, and such?
I do.
Melody, a lot of you. Great. Yeah, I think these are great ways to spice things up a little bit. Make them. I like to think of these things as lubrication for your ideas. So you wrap them in all this lubrication of good word choices and such, and your ideas will just get into people's heads so much easier.
Hey, George, can we get back to the healthcare framing?
Sure.
Because I had I had a cousin come visit me about a month ago, and she hit me with all the Republican frames on healthcare. I've lived too long. I don't want the government controlling my healthcare. It'll cost even more. So I just wanted to, and I put a couple phrases in the chat, which I think are clearly in her frame. Yet I'm saying her frame is wrong. And could you express to the group what I've done wrong in those two things I put in the chat? One thing I was going to say is COVID-19 is a pretty clear expression of needing good government and good health and well-run healthcare. Maybe that's what I should have said to her at first.
Well, say that again.
Well, I can read the two things that are in the chat too.
But let me hear what you just said last.
What I just said last. COVID-19 is a clear expression of needing good government, not the elimination of government, needing health care for all.
Yeah, and that's way closer. But go ahead, Lisa. You were going to say something.
Phil put two things in the chat. Private health care is more consequential to the USA than the Versailles Treaty was to post-World War I Germany. That was one thing. And then the other is 22 of 23 countries are cheaper than the USA. 21 have government-run systems. So you're saying that 23...
Overwhelming evidence that government-run healthcare is better for society. And I'm still in her frames. Is what I'm saying. I mean, George, you've been preaching to me for years, and I'm still in her frames, in my opinion.
It's really hard to get out of them sometimes. And also, I think you probably lost anybody under 40 anyway with the Versailles Treaty, post-World War I, and Germany in the same sentence. These are all good points. And as and I know we've talked about this before, not that you can't bring up facts to bolster what you're saying, but you can't lead with them because you turn them off. They don't want to hear anything you're going to say. Let me give you a frame that I think is wonderful for this, and it's also in the chat. Virginia put it in there.
Yes, I saw that.
Healthcare made easy. This is something. Virginia, do you want to talk about that for a minute? How you guys came up with that? Are you there, Virginia?
She's muted.
Maybe not. She might have stepped away for a minute. She sat down with her. She's got a number of groups she has going up in Rush City, Pine City area, and then one is Women Thinking Out Loud. I think it's great, and Virginia is her group comes up with some great stuff, and they said, well, Medicare for All is healthcare made easy, and so when you think about that, what does that mean? What do you mean healthcare made easy? Well, think about healthcare right now. Everything is hard. Oh, hello, are you there, Virginia?
Yeah, health. Yeah, yeah.
But everything about healthcare is hard. Now, I'm not getting into, I'm not really using numbers here, but I'm just, you want to go to the doctor, well, first off, you have to have health insurance. So if you don't, it's pretty hard on you. It's hard on the doctors. They don't like the current system. It's hard on your pocketbook and the company you work for, which now companies are more and more putting that the cost over to you. So it's hard on them. Medicare for All is healthcare made easy. Everybody's in, nobody's out. This is another part of the framing they came up with. Everybody's in, nobody's out. It's all taken care of. And people, if they want to argue with you then on specific points, say, yeah, but it's going to cost me more. Well, it doesn't. Just like we said before, all of those things they say about Obamacare are actually the problems with what we've got. Well, you're saying you don't want to pay more taxes. Well, you'll pay less money in taxes than you'll pay for your health insurance now.
George, I need to say one thing.
Oh, yes,
You
go.
need to share your screen again because right now you're not on.
Oh, yeah, okay. Let me do that.
Okay.
Hello, I'm back. So, but yeah, I see what you're getting at there, and that's important. I know we've talked about this before. Facts and logic, it's not that they're unimportant. It's that they're just not terribly effective with most people. It's going to be their emotions about it. So healthcare made easy. Well, there's, easy is a nice feeling, How can you say that? Why are you saying it's easy? Well, it's easy because you get a card. Tell a story. You get a card. You go to whatever doctor you want to, because if they're going to be in business, they're pretty much going to take Medicare, right? Go to any doctor you want to, give them the card, walk out. No bill, nothing. It's over, it's done, you get what you need.
Okay, there's a question.
Yes.
So people are afraid they'll lose their Cadillac plans or that they'll lose something when it's made easy. So how do you answer that one? If it's Medicare, for instance, and you have to buy extra or whatever, are you going to lose something if it's
Right.
like Medicare for All?
We hear that all the
Or
time,
made
and they
easy.
talk about the Cadillac plan and all that. Medicare for All is the Cadillac plan.
That's it.
You get what you need. You get the health care you need. More so than you're getting now. People on Medicare
And no
get their healthcare.
surprise bills.
No surprise bills. You don't have to worry about if somebody's in network or out of network. You go see the doctor you want to see. That was one that didn't come up before. Well, the freedom of choice. But you get to see the doctor you want to see because all the doctors are going to be in the pool. Virtually every one of them is going to take Medicare because that's what everybody's going to be on. And
George.
few people are going to be able to fork over. If people want to get some other plan to cover Botox or whatever the heck it is, and they suppose they can do that, but or long-term care, things of that sort.
Somebody has a
But-
question, George.
Okay.
Yeah, George. I was just I'm sitting here on Facebook and this thing popped up and it was a cartoon against teachers for supporting the leftist agenda of Medicare for All. Okay, so while you guys were talking, I wrote Medicare for All. Okay, great idea. Everyone deserves health care. Okay, does
Yep.
that sound like I framed it kind of right?
Yep. Everyone deserves
Okay.
health care.
And someone came back at me and said, actually, no one deserves anything unless they have earned it. And then I came back to her as no child deserves to die from lack of health care.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, I'm getting it?
You did good. You stayed on your message. You stayed on your message, and you didn't actually directly engage their thing about they have to earn it. You just said you brought it right back to real people and what happens, and no child should have to do it. No one should have to worry
Yeah,
about
but I
that.
thought child is, more.
Yeah, much
That-
better.
That sensory
Because
thing.
they can't earn it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. People always say they earn it. They need to earn it. But how's a child going to earn it?
Now you can also say, as citizens in a democracy, we have the ultimate authority. We're the ones who make the decisions. Yeah, we have elect our representatives, but if they're not doing the job, we send them home and get somebody who will do the job. But as citizens, we've said that there are all sorts of things that we think we all benefit from, so we all contribute to. For example, the military. We all contribute to the military. The military protects the country.
Yeah, I
So
shouldn't have any-
we
I
do
shouldn't
that.
have
In
any
fact, it's
military-
what's that, Phil?
I shouldn't have any military unless I pay for it.
Yeah, exactly. So should we send you a bill for an aircraft carrier? If for some reason you live on the coast and they have to defend you from Russian submarines,
And should they defend only some of the people?
Right.
Because maybe they don't want to defend all the people because those people shouldn't be defended.
And we've also
That doesn't
decided
make any
to.
sense, does it?
Yeah, exactly. And why not all people? Like we do with the roads. Everybody can use the roads. We pay for the roads with taxes because it's a greater good for everybody. It makes sense. Should every road be a toll road? So just on the face of it, really, we as citizens get to do what we want. If we say everybody gets covered, and all we're doing is changing who's paying the bill to the doctors. The doctor's bill comes from the insurance company, or the doctor's bill comes from the government. They get paid in either case. We're just wiping out the middleman. And we can. And talking about that, we didn't really get into a lot of facts and numbers and all that. We're talking about what's right and wrong. I love the fact that you said children, because I think you were right. That's much stronger because it's a visual thing. Everybody cares about children. Children are vulnerable and defenseless, and so we want to protect children. And how can anybody say, well, no, some children have to earn it?
So George, what about this?
Yeah.
Again, like a strong statement. So if someone responding to like the healthcare. So if someone without health insurance is injured in a traffic accident, we shouldn't take him to the hospital. We should just let him die, right? What about that? Is that like too strong? Is it?
Actually,
it kind of
can
follows
I
what
just
you're
jump-
saying.
Can I jump in with that, if you don't mind? And I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Go for it.
I kind of wanted to interject earlier. If this is okay, I apologize, but I've been doing a lot of research about this. We're talking about framing, but I think the idea is, in a lot of what I've read lately, like over the last week and a half or so, which is what happens is somebody has a position that's kind of ridiculous to the right, or I don't want to get into directions too much. And so what your thought is, let's go the other way with it, like exactly what you're saying, which is, well, is this too much to say? And I think we talk about framing, George, but I think we need to talk about, and this depends on your audience, and this is where it gets really kind of, who are we talking to? When you're talking to extreme rightists, we'll say, you're not going to change your mind by pulling in the opposite direction. This equal and opposite force thing doesn't work. What I've learned is, and I don't know if it's true, I haven't applied it yet, is you kind of empathize with their position. You don't say, you're here, I'm going this way. You say, yeah, I kind of see it, but I mean, think about this a little bit. And
Sure.
you kind of, you can't, I mean, you got to kind of lay down a rose path for them to follow. You can't just go in this opposite direction and be like, oh, you think you know that? Well, I know this because I have numbers, and this kind of gets into that thing. It's really about like, okay, I see where your problem is. You don't like taxes going up, and I understand that. And let's talk about this, though. When it comes to taxes, maybe we look at where we're spending taxes otherwise, if we can move that around, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But everything I've seen in the last 10 minutes is always like, how do we counter that? How do we counter that? And of course, we're right, so we want to counter it.
Right.
But instead of trying to pull equally hard on the other side of the rope, maybe we just try to budge a little bit. We just move them a little bit at a time, and it takes time, and it takes patience, and it takes consistency. But everything I've been kind of learning about this, George, that seems to be the thing to do when you're kind of dealing with a very hard-nosed extremist on the side that's opposed.
Well, and really with anybody, I mean, first off, at this point in time in the election cycle, if you've got a hardcore extreme right-wing person on your phone bank, you just say, have a nice day, goodbye, and move on. But talking about, well, I go back to what Julie Ethan, who worked with me on this, and her experience with the immigration example we used. And her friend just said, I don't think of them as criminals. I think of them, or he said, I don't think of them as illegals. I think of them as refugees. And basically the concept here is to always give them another way to think about it, which is what you said. But lay a path out for them to go down to consider this issue from another viewpoint. And and I would even back off a little bit on acknowledging their position. You can say maybe instead, "Oh, I hear what you say. I think of it differently," which is kind of what you're saying. I think of it differently, and here's how I look at it. And now you have a conversation that is more open to actual conversation. And you're talking about right and wrong, which again puts you and the voter a little bit more at ease because you're talking about what's right and wrong. But you're right. We spend way too much time responding. We have to know what they're saying, but we need to pivot, just like that Nancy Pelosi video, which was so good. I think everybody here saw that. That is a great video. And just when you see her on TV, she does it all the time. She's just brilliant at it. She doesn't want to talk about something. She just goes right on to what she wants to talk about. That's a distraction. We should be thinking about all the people dying of COVID and move right on and blow past it.
Here's the problem with that is you have to have a lot of stature to do that. Like as a young, in my case, blossoming candidate, I don't have the backing power to do that. If I do that, it's kind of political suicide. So it's a convenience I think that Nancy Pelosi has that people at my level don't necessarily.
Well, yeah, and I think if you're pivoting directly, if you're talking to a voter and you pivot directly away from what it is the voter was talking about, that's not going to help. But I still think in whatever the issue is you're talking about or the subject, you can pivot to your message about it and your way of thinking about it and your perspective on it, which, so you can say, well, I hear what you're saying, or I hear what you're saying. I look at it this way and consider this for a moment. And then you just talk about that and then keep coming back to that, and you may have, like I say to people, you may not know what the effect of that conversation is when you leave that person, when you hang the phone up or walk away from the door. You may not know. But over time, if we're all doing this, people will begin to see how we see it differently. And that's what we're not doing right now. We're not showing people what it is we really believe about the issues. We're really good at, giving them, here's the facts and logic, but, why do you care about that? Why do you care? I know Philip cares about, electric cars and the environment, more than anybody. And he is absolutely brilliant on this. He's the electric car guy in Minnesota. And he's done this before, and we have the same conversation a lot of times. Philip goes, well, what about this and this? He goes, but what I really want to say is this, and then you say exactly what you need to say. And and Philip did a great job talking about using his values and talking about that at a state central committee meeting last year, to great applause. People stood up and said, yeah, it's about time somebody said that. And it was all about values. And so I don't want to leave you with the impression that Philip doesn't do that. He does it very well.
I catch myself all the time.
I do too.
Just in their frames.
It's a skill. We're kind of picking up an instrument, and we're in our first year of playing it. We're not Eric Clapton yet, but we keep doing it. Kathy?
By the way, I heard Nancy Pelosi today, the reporter at CNN said, isn't $200 better than nothing? In other words, she should compromise. Yeah. And she said, I'm not going to debate it with you. And blah, 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 blah.
She's pretty good. I like watching her just because you get the feel of it. It's like, I keep going back to music, but when I learn to play music, I'll listen to what the original artist has done, because I play mostly by ear. And so that gets me started. And then over time, I change it and make it my own. But, listening to what other people do and say is good. Kathy, you were going to say something.
Well, I wonder how effective is it, or might it just get you in trouble to say to someone, you seem like a kind and loving person. I can't imagine that you would want children to suffer if they got sick and needed care. Or something along those lines.
Who wants to take that question?
You're putting it on them that you seem like a nice person. I can't imagine you wouldn't want people to have health care.
The only danger you have there is that if you say that and they disagree with you, now you've just shown them that they're not a nice person. I know you don't care, but I think you might have shut off the conversation there.
Maybe it needed to. At
What
that
what
point.
what you might do is look for something that they say and that is empathetic and that is along the lines of our values, or say, you have health insurance for your kids, right? And
Or if they did say something that you felt you could say, like, I heard you say da 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 this thing that matches our values. What this is what I think, or something like that. But that the other way you said it could maybe be a little I don't know.
It puts you in trouble.
Yeah.
It could. It could.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that whether it would or not. Okay.
Yeah, I recently had a Facebook where someone said, "You're right, as you always think you are." I mean, I try very hard to stick to the issue, and I don't say anything about the person who wrote it. I'm just trying to get them to say a different idea. But yeah, they kind of dug the knife in on that one.
Yeah. Oh, but that's what people live for on the internet, though. Getting in the good one, saying the clever thing,
Yeah. Well, I let that one go. I always figure whatever's on Facebook could be there 50 years from now. So right with that in mind.
I'll point out just for fun here, I'll bring this up in another one, but talking about being on the internet 50 years from now, are any of you been to the Wayback Machine ever?
No.
Okay. Google Wayback Machine when you get a chance. You type in a web address and it'll show you websites going back to 1998. And so if you have an opponent and all of a sudden they put something on their website and then like it's been there for months and somebody discovers it's some hateful, nasty Nazi thing, they take it off their website. You go to the Wayback Machine, you look at their website from three months ago and it's there. And you can see it. And most people don't know about it, so the candidates don't know they should go to the Internet Archive, which is what runs it, and say, would you take me off the Wayback Machine? I don't want you to do that. And this thing was started to have, because the person who started it said that one of the problems in the early Internet is all of this is history, it's all ephemeral. Once time goes on and the website's changed, what was there was lost. So, I can go back to my website, which was for video equipment, and I can see the early days of HTML where like, oh, I discovered the blink command and now text is blinking, So it's embarrassing, but it's a great tool if you want to go back and find something.
So you can be removed from that too.
You can call them and say, or talk to them and say, I don't want you to do this and please destroy any records you have. But people generally don't know about it, so it's like, I don't like talking about it when there's conservatives around because I don't want them to know about it.
So extra points.
Extra
points for anybody who knows where the term Wayback Machine came from.
Yeah.
Okay, who remembers a cartoon called Rocky and Bullwinkle?
No.
Mr. Sherman and Mr. Peabody, that little history part they had,
No
they'd go, well, Sherman, let's go in the Wayback Machine. And then they'd go back in
Big
history and learn
thing.
something. That's where that came from. Rocky and Bullwinkle, best cartoon ever. Ever.
They had Nastasia and Boris, right?
Yep.
And Dudley Do-Right.
No, Dudley Do-Right was a whole separate cartoon.
Oh, it's the same people, but yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but Frostbite Falls is in Minnesota, but up by the Canadian border.
Which,
Natasha always says, oh, moose and squirrel.
Moose and squirrel.
So if for some reason Trump wins again and we all have to head north for the re-education camps, I'd make the suggestion that what we do instead is secede from the United States, because we're kind of the part of Canada that's in the United States anyway, especially the way we speak, right? For all of us Minnesota people, we would gladly bring Michigan with us.
Hey, George, I never even heard of the Wayback until Trump got elected. And then they started this group started throwing a bunch of stuff on the Wayback Machine because they were afraid of Trump
Oh,
destroying
yeah.
and changing records.
Oh,
Yep,
yeah.
because they
Climate
did.
change
They
stuff.
did.
Yeah, that was being stored.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
actual organization is the internetarchive.org, and they host the Wayback Machine is one of their things. But they archive all sorts of stuff. And yeah, I remember that the scientists are going, they're going to get rid of all of this stuff. They're going to, it's all going to go down the memory hole. And so
Isn't there like a Wayback Machine in Alexandria, Egypt as well?
maybe,
Same idea, because that was the first library, the first,
yeah,
first library of antiquity that we know of.
yeah. Well, folks, I think we've had another fun evening. Really appreciate everybody being here.
Next Monday, we'll get an email out about this sooner rather than later. But we're just going bring your issue, and we'll like look at issues and create messages around them. So we'll be framing issues, but they'll be your issues that you want to frame.
And we'll be using our secret weapon, the stop, drop, and roll.
Okay.
We'll show you how to do it. So,
All right. By the way, George, I got an electric car for sale, a Leaf.
okay. I'm driving my hybrid, and I know I should have got electric, but I got to go to Chicago. All right, but I'll let people know because I know it will have been well taken care of.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
All right.
All right, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming
Bye.
tonight.
See you next week. Invite people, please.
Yeah.
Okay, folks. Bye-bye. connectionslab.org